I doubt many people may even remember that this place existed, but before the days of Barnes & Noble, the biggest bookstore chain in the country was Crown Books. They discounted every book, and that was the reason why they were able to become so big for so long. However, they closed in 2001. I used to be a manager of a Crown bookstore, actually. It really was the best job I ever had. Sure, it didn't pay that great, but the work itself was very satisfying. I honestly look forward to going into work almost every day. I also worked with some really smart students, and it was a huge change from the previous fast food joints I had been employed in before. Anyway, when the store was in its final throes, there wasn't a lot of money to go around exactly, so every manager worked a shift by themselves. I took a lot of the closing shifts because I was a night owl. I almost always let my employees go home early, and I would be by myself in the store for around an hour or so, just finishing up with the rest of the work. These days, it seems that bookstores always have shelves that people can see over. The Crown store I worked at was not like this. The shelves were all very high, and you literally couldn't tell if there was anyone in the store with you. On the night this happened, I had one of my employees go up and down the aisles and check the bathrooms to make sure there was no one still in the store. When he confirmed this, I let the employees out the door, then made sure the lobby lights were off, and I went into the back room to do the final paperwork of the day. Although I liked being in the store by myself, I had to admit that it was a bit frightening at times. But the back room had one of those combination button locks on it, so I always felt fine back there. I was doing my paperwork when I realized that there was a book that was special ordered that had been shelved. I went out into the store in order to look for it. There were a few security lights in the store, but they honestly didn't provide much illumination. I didn't turn any of the other lights on, because they weren't supposed to be back on after the store closed. The book I was searching for was some sort of diet book, so I went over to the self-help section, which is where we kept those sorts of books. I walked down the first aisle and turned the corner. Checking through the books, I noticed that it wasn't on the shelf. I turned the other corner and then checked on that side to see if the book was misplaced by a shelf or two. I did end up finding it. I then walked up to the front of the store. I cannot convey how creepy this was, walking through this empty store. I don't believe in ghosts, but have often thought that if a ghost existed, a bookstore would be just the right place for him or her to hang out. So, walking around in a dark store with limited view, everything about it just freaked me out. Every little tiny noise caught my attention. Walking around the book stacks, I was happy when I finally made it to the front registers. We kept all special orders right there. I pulled out a slip and began writing. I'm not sure why I did it, but I raised my head up and looked at the security monitor. There were 4 cameras in my store. My blood nearly froze in my veins when I saw that someone was standing in the self-help aisle I had just recently walked out of. It was a giant man, maybe over 6 foot tall and dressed in black, holding some sort of weapon in his hand. I wasn't really sure what to do. I should have just left the store and went and called the police. I didn't want to do it in the store, though, because if the man heard me, he might decide to come after me. I was too stupid to consider doing that. Instead, I thought of the back room and the combination door. The self-help section was on the complete opposite side of the store, so I could probably get to the back room before him. After standing for a moment, I jumped over the counter and began booking it for the back room. It was down a short hallway. I got to the door with no problem. I typed in the 4-digit code and turned the handle. As I did so, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye and saw the man at the end of the hallway. I swung the door open, ran in, and forced it closed. Immediately, I saw the handle jiggling. He was trying to get in. When he realized he couldn't, he started pounding loudly on the door. I wasn't worried about the man getting through. It was made to keep people like this out of the back room. I called the police, and they immediately sent a car over. When they arrived, the man was just leaving the store through the front door, which he must have unlocked himself. They arrested him, and the item he was carrying was a very sharp knife. It took me a very long time to be okay with working alone again. I used to work in a Borders bookstore. I was an assistant manager there. One of my favorite people working at the store was a lady who was in charge of the children's section. And she was a very pleasant lady, and was actually very popular with everyone working there. The kids also liked her a lot too. She did story time every week, and many kids came in to watch this woman with the amazing, friendly personality. One thing about story time that no one really liked, though, were the costumes. We were sent costumes for certain stories, and were supposed to occasionally incorporate them into story time. No one liked to wear them, though, because they always just seemed really dirty. We never really had any idea how old they were, and how many people might have worn them before, so finding anyone to play them was never that easy. The costumes would be shipped in huge boxes, and as manager, I was one of the people who had to sign for them when they arrived. The day this weird stuff happened, I heard the back buzzer. Upon going back there, I brought the box in and curiously opened it. It was a really ugly and scary-looking thing, some sort of humanoid character with a really fat head. I wish I could recall what children's book the character was from, but I can't quite bring it to my memory. The thing was extremely creepy, and although most workers didn't want to wear the costumes to begin with, they especially didn't want to wear this one. The normal people who could be convinced were adamant that this was not one they were willing to put on. Finally, when no one else would agree to it, to keep the story time happening, the story lady decided she would wear the costume if I was willing to read the story to the children. It wasn't something I had ever done before, but I was definitely willing to try. About an hour before the story time, the story lady went into the back room to put on the costume. I went and grabbed a copy of the book myself. At the story time, when the children were all gathered around, the story lady didn't show up at first. When she finally did, it was very odd. She was stumbling around a bit. I assumed it was just her acting like the character, who I wasn't quite familiar with. I began reading the book, and the character was supposed to have the kids sit on her lap, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she just tried waving to the kids and shaking hands. After a few moments, though, she almost fell over onto one of them. I was confused, but thought she may have just lost her balance in the costume. I had this horrible thought in my mind that she wasn't really in there. I thought maybe someone might have done something to her or something, but that didn't make sense. I didn't think anyone could have gotten into our stockroom. However, suddenly the character fell down on its knees. I was concerned at first and went up to her. Then suddenly I could hear vomiting inside the suit. The kids all freaked out and moved away. I helped her to pull the costume head off. The lady looked horrible. She was sweaty and looked a strange shade of red. I thought perhaps she was just suffocating in the suit. I tried to help her to the back room while calling another manager over to try and calm down the children. I managed to get her into the back room. I moved her over to a chair, which just happened to be beside the box the costume came in. She just looked awful. I called an ambulance. Upon examining the inside, they found the tip of a razor inside the costume, and it had been laced with poison. The lady recalled feeling a sharp pain when putting the costume on, but thought maybe it was just something in the costume that was broken. She didn't think it was anything to worry about. We had to get the police involved at that point, knowing some sick individual must have put that razor in there. However, there wasn't really enough information to find out who it was in the end. The story lady recovered, but we never got another person in the store to ever wear that costume again. I know that you don't generally put stories on your channel that have supernatural elements in them, but I hope you will narrate this story. It's a really freaky experience that I had while working at the Barnes & Noble in Crystal Lake, Illinois. I remember working at the information desk on this day. I received a phone call and answered it. The person claimed to be a person working for a local newspaper. I later found out that this wasn't true at all. It was, in actuality, a person who was working at the Borders Bookstore in Gurnee, Illinois. I only found this out because one of my good friends worked at that store and told me about it. The guy from Borders asked me about the store being haunted. I told him I had never heard of such a thing before. He asked to speak to a manager. I was right beside the manager, who did tell him that the haunting was just a rumor and there was no validity to it at all. Well, of course, after the phone call, I asked the manager what exactly that was all about. She told me that the store had a reputation for being haunted. Employees who worked there before her reported it was. The employees who worked there before her reported it, and it was even written about in a book. I guess around Halloween time they always got calls from people asking about this sort of thing. It was simple things like book carts being moved without anyone around, books falling off the shelves when they had no reason to be doing that, and there were stories of physical entities as well. There was supposedly a blue ball of light and an old man who looked like a farmer or something. However, all of the current employees of the store had never seen anything, so it was all considered to be made up. I'm not going to be one of those people who claim they didn't believe in ghosts before my experience. Honestly, whenever I hear someone claim that, I roll my eyes. I seriously doubt some of these skeptics to begin with. They just claim that in order to make their story seem that much more believable. I, in fact, did believe in ghosts, although I had never actually experienced a haunting before. I just felt that a world in which ghosts existed was a lot more interesting than one in which they didn't. It was about a week later when I was working a closing shift. I had been reorganizing our manga and graphic novel section, which had a tendency to get messed up. The managers always had to keep one employee in the store with them after closing. I wasn't done with my work yet, so I agreed to stay. It generally took the manager up to an hour and a half to finish working, and I intended to use that time to get all of my work done. The store was always pretty dark after closing. You know, you can't let people think the store was still open after all. And I have to admit it was pretty creepy, sitting in that big, dark store all alone. The manager was in the back office, and the office door was locked because he was counting money. I finally finished the majority of my work at this point. Then I noticed that once I had everything shelved good, there was a large empty spot. I had worked so hard on it at that point that I wanted to go and get some more books so it would look perfect. There weren't any on the book carts, so I had to make my way into the back room. Our back room was huge and had tons of shelves. The shelves didn't have backs on them, so you could see through to the other parts of the stockroom. Still, most of them were overstocked with books, so if someone had been in there, it would have been plausible for him to sneak up on you. However, I didn't really feel that anything like that was too likely. I was just in my own mind making up an imaginary fear. The lighting was also really dim in there. I didn't really think about turning on more lights though. I had been back there plenty of times and would only be there for a few minutes anyway. It was creepy though. At the time, I had forgotten all about the whole haunted talk I'd had with the manager. I went to the overstock shelf that had the unshelved graphic novels on them. I pulled up a really small handcart, which was like a small dolly. I took some books and laid them down upon it. I think it was after I had bent over about 2 times that when I stood back up, I looked through the shelves, only to come face to face with a man standing on the other side. He was looking at me, and he looked very angry. I yelped and nearly fell backward, taking my eyes off him for just a moment. When I looked back up, though, he was gone. I thought he had to be in the stockroom, possibly coming around the shelf for me. I left the graphic novels behind and ran for the stockroom door. I exited and ran to the office. I pounded on the door, and when the manager opened, I told him someone was with us in the store, and he had to still be there, because the alarms would have been set off if he'd gone through the door. We barricaded ourselves in the office and looked through all the security cameras. The police came, but just like us, they couldn't find anything. One of the police thought we were playing a prank because he had been called out a few years before for a very similar story. They found no one, and the alarms never went off, so the person couldn't have left. And it was an angry man who had been seen in the back room. We were freaked out. Most of the other employees didn't believe us, though. They thought I made it up because of receiving that phone call a week earlier. But no, that wasn't it. I really did see a man back there. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. Sorry I've been kind of quiet lately and haven't been posting as much. I've just been kind of tired and focusing on school. And the new Monster Hunter came out as well recently, so I've been really addicted to that and just get carried away sometimes. I'm really sorry about that, but I'll try to get back to posting every other day or so, and hopefully do some more creepypastas as well. I know it's been quite a while since I did one of those, a couple of months at least. In addition, tomorrow is my birthday, and it's also the day that my copyright strikes run out, so I can do stuff again. I know I haven't done anything on the second channel yet, but that's just because I've been really busy, but summer is coming up and I'll have a lot of free time, so I should be able to do more stuff there, as well as more scary videos as well. Maybe I'll try to do a true crime series or something. Special thanks in this video to my artist friend Alan, who always does my thumbnails for all of my work. The links to his social media will be in the description below, in case you want to check him out for a commission, or just to buy some of his artwork or something like that. He does really great stuff. In addition, I want to thank my friend KillerOrangeCat for allowing me to use some of his stories in this video as well, since Let's Not Meet stories are not the most accessible these days for me. That said, guys, links to all of my social media are in the description below as always. Please be sure to check them out and send me a message if you feel like talking to me. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible, although if you message me on Facebook, I tend to be a little lackluster at answering on there sometimes, because I just don't check it as often as the others. In addition, you can send your own stories to my social media and I'll read them in my videos as well. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the music used in this video, it's listed in the description below and in the order it appears as well, with links to the artists themselves. If you have any constructive feedback for me, be sure to leave it in the comments below, and please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. I think that's everything, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.